So this is it. This is the last AlgoFest show of the day. And if you're still watching, you must be in Hawaii or maybe you're in Australia because it is late on the East Coast. But I appreciate that you are still here. I am, of course, the real Monty Allen, and I am your crypto nerd.
And I am still Cooper Daniels from the Recoup. And welcome back for the final one, AlgoFest 2021.
All right, we're gonna end with a bang. We got Algopulse here. Oh,
Yeah,
I gotta change your intro. All right, you guys ask the question. I'm gonna go change your label on the video. Look, it's the last one.
How you going, guys?
Hey.
Thanks for having us here.
Yeah, thank you for coming. So we have Dimitri from Algopulse, and yeah. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing over there at Algopulse?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Coop. So what we have sort of concocted here with Algopulse is, well, I suppose I'll start with a bit of backstory first. Where we sort of came from in terms of the angle getting into Algorand, and we are sort of late adopters of Algorand and blockchain cryptocurrency, because we've been sort of traditionally working in the digital marketing, advertising, as well as content production space. And where the initial sort of link to Algorand first came in was, I'm actually sort of childhood friends with Michael Cotton, who you guys had just sort of had on. And just as sort of people do over the years, you sort of lose touch with one another. And we made a opportunity to sort of catch up for, well, me a beer. He obviously, it was on a Coke Zero, but we had an opportunity to sort of catch up. And this is where we both sort of started discussing, what we'd been up to in each other's lives. And we'd just sort of recently been engaging a lot of AI-based technology platforms in developing their branding, as well as their sort of communication and content strategies, building websites, a lot of the sort of services that, these sort of tech startups would need and require. And then that's when we got introduced to Algorand. And then, we later sort of discovered that, everything that Michael is obviously involved with, AJ and Meld Ventures, there was a synergy there between the services that, my partner, Tom Ryan, and I, who is the other co-founder of Algopulse, were providing. And this is where, we had sort of discarded, we originally wanted to try and produce a documentary series for Netflix about Algorand and the projects he was involved with. And as we sort of kept going into it, we started trying to consider the narrative of Algorand. How do we go about telling this story? And when we started sort of going into a deep dive in terms of trying to find information about Algorand, we found that everything was really fragmented. There were a lot of self-imposed experts, but nothing really that we can point to as like a source of news and truth. As well as we found that although quite comprehensive, the Algorand, the information coming down from the Algorand website was a little bit more developer focused and not as skewed towards the uninitiated users as Mike had prefaced in the sort of conversation before. So we saw that really as an opportunity to come together and collaborate and saying, hey, well, is there a missing piece in this ecosystem as far as driving a larger awareness about Algorand, not just to the people who are currently involved and are enthusiastic and are loyalists to the, I guess you could say, brand, but then everybody else who, whenever you have a conversation with someone about crypto, and more and more now that we've been getting deeper and deeper involved, they immediately will say, oh, okay, yeah, that's nothing that I need to worry about now. But hey, can you tell me more about what it is? And I think there's this real sense of missing out, and it's now sort of getting to the point where it's garnering a lot of authenticity.
Oh, I lost your volume. Was it just me?
No, we lost.
Oh,
sorry. Can you still hear me?
No, that was good. Yeah.
Sorry, guys. But it's certainly getting to the point now where the larger community can't ignore it any longer. Like I think they realize that it's here to stay. And obviously, with what Algorand's been doing in terms of El Salvador, the Marshall Islands, those sort of really infrastructural government level activity, just brings this sort of greater awareness. So to sort of circle back, we ended up sort of coming to the conclusion that, hey, there was a real opportunity here for quality marketing services in what we were already doing, as well as establishing this news resource that will actively be the sort of source of news and truth for the Algorand ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this entire thing was kind of born with that spirit of like, we have this thing here that not enough people know about. And like, how do we get the word out? And then also like, I'm realizing that I'm not original, because I started doing my channel for basically the same reasons. Like, I want to be able to communicate this to people that don't quite, aren't initiated in a simple way, and try to do it with humor and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's really cool. I'm not as familiar as I should be with Algopulse, so I'm excited to, check you guys out more and look a little further into it. So cool.
Yeah, we look forward to talking more about it.
I think it's a great idea, and something that we definitely need, because it has been very sporadic, right? You got guys like Coop and I who we pop in from now and then, but there's nobody like double checks us. There's nobody that audits our work, and I've clearly made mistakes in the past, and and then I find out somebody comments something and corrects me, and I got to go back and be like, oh, okay, well, it's a community event, like we all learn together.
Yeah.
But having something like Algopulse lends some authenticity and some credibility, I think, to us. There's a couple of really cool questions here. One of them is, as part of what you're going to do, is there going to be a weekly or monthly kind of a newsletter, or how are you going to keep everybody updated?
Yeah, certainly. So weekly sort of touch points are going to be a critical part of a content strategy. And I guess sort of, a precursor to that is what we've been really working hard on is establishing this sort of mycelium type network throughout the Algorand ecosystem, and sort of touching base with the various stakeholders, whether that's projects coming to market, the VCs who are actively invested in a lot of these projects, Algorand Foundation as well too, and then obviously community members, such as yourselves as well too, that are sort of the proponents and the voices of Algorand sort of in the community. So what we're trying to do first is really sort of build this robust network of sort of contacts rather, that will become essentially the initial content launch and the initial proponent on the website. So we're looking to launch the first version, which is our sort of 0.5 version, in November this year. And essentially that's just going to be a really robust content portal where people can then start to come back to in terms of having these news and developments, because essentially there was a lot of information that the community felt that they weren't being privy to in terms of these updates about the community. One of the constant and ongoing things is like, hey, when's Anthill coming down? They haven't posted a tweet yet. What's happening? Whereas, in reality, what's happening behind the scenes is quite a lot of really interesting work. So it's just trying to bridge that gap into connecting to
Chris
the community.
Is involved with Algopulse too, isn't he?
He's an advisor on the project, and he's been institutional. We're going to be a DAO-based news organization. Chris being a huge proponent in DAO organizations. So he's been sort of instrumental in really determining how we can try and get as robust functionality as possible, as well as trying to include the community as a whole. To go back to the question, we're trying to establish now, our expertise and background has been in really high level content production. So whether that is, logos and branding, illustration, animated videos, we're now sort of seeing, obviously, this format being a weekly YouTube show as potentially the sort of, at least the go-to source that we can start engaging the audience with now until this sort of site launches. So we're just going through a series of building assets and building the format and testing that structure, because what we really want to provide, these types of discussions are fundamental, and we need more and more of it. But what we probably saw was there was missing, I guess, a production value, so to speak, in terms of creating this sort of this entity that people can look to with authority that is reflective of the big things that Algorand are doing. And that's what we're really trying to bring to the market, is I guess that level of production value.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
All right,
we're looking forward to having you guys a part of it.
Yeah. So how will you kind of incorporate the community? And you mentioned like bringing in the community, and what are do you have any specific plans for that, or?
Yeah, we've got really robust plans for that, which we've been working quite quite in detail over the the past couple of months, really trying to figure out that robust framework for making that happen. So we're working with Hippo Labs, who are also a partner with ours on this project to build the smart contracts and the robust functionality, which we're hoping to launch around March next year. And effectively, what we're trying to do at that point is establish a system where the community can help contribute to the news and the direction of the platform. So essentially, we're trying to set up we're coming from an agency background, we realized how hard it is to get qualitative work across the line and at scale. So what we've really tried to do is use that expertise in the industry that we've been involved with for the last 15 years to try and find a framework to which the community can adopt those practices. So we're trying to establish an ambassador community, essentially, where we've got 3 levels. So we've got the government's ambassadors, which is sort of our top tier, who will basically be initiating the governance protocol on the site. So I'll risk me getting off onto a tangent. I'll continue with this. And essentially then underneath them is moderation ambassadors, who are effectively project managers and work directly with projects on Algorand to try and contribute content to their pages on Algopulse. So, and then underneath them, we're trying to establish, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Behance, but essentially this sort of creative portfolio website where a series of creatives, whether that is article writers, illustrators, animators, these sort of essential services to creating content on Algopulse will then sort of work underneath them. So essentially what we're looking to facilitate is this system where we pay the ambassador community in our Pulse tokens. They are able to then exchange their services for work with the various projects around the Algorand ecosystem, and then that exchange being in their native tokens, which will then be sort of contributed to this Algopulse pool. And essentially what we're doing there is, typically in the marketing space, and as we've had discussions with a lot of projects, there has been, I guess, a lack of really qualitative marketing in the crypto space, as well as there has typically been some models which haven't necessarily been as helpful to early stage projects. So typically, a lot of the conversations we were having with projects is that they wouldn't sort of be all that surprised if they're looking for $15,000 US a month, as well as a percentage of tokens, and then some firms will actually take a percentage of the seed round raise as well too. So I mean, that will prohibit the ability to onboard sort of really robust skill sets within the project. So what we're looking to do is obviously come to the market with an affordable service, as well as then the token percentages, we're not keeping those in our private wallets. We're actually contributing that to the Algopulse pool, which is essentially then creates like an index token. But then we're looking to onboard a series of investment ambassadors, so really high-level people who are quite skilled in the DeFi realm, to then basically act as custodians to that sort of Algopulse pool, and then engage it in yield farming activities, and sort of put that to work across the Algorand ecosystem. So in exchange for projects sort of donating tokens to being a part of the Algopulse website, we're actually contributing tokens back to going towards funding a learn-to-earn feature about projects. So as we develop articles, animated videos, bits of content, panel discussions, we actually incentivize the community in terms of they get rewarded for viewing and engaging in content. So we were trying to, and that's again one of the really interesting things about Algorand that we really haven't seen anywhere, is the community is extremely well engaged. They're extremely positive. They really want to see this thing succeed, and they're willing to do a lot of heavy lifting for little to no reward. So what we're trying to do is give back to that effort and provide an incentivized model where you can actually go about earning cryptocurrency by participating in propagating Algorand through the ecosystem.
Oh, that's excellent. The small portion of it sounds a little bit like the the Coinbase program. Was it Coinbase Learn or something like that, right? Where if you watch 4 videos or something, you were $3 worth of whatever cryptocurrency it is. It sounds like that facet of it is one piece of what you're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what we also wanted to do as well too is this uninitiated user base, which frankly is the majority of the people currently, will need to be incentivized if they're trying to get deeper and deeper. So that's why, we're also working with the Algorand Foundation as well too, to start developing a lot of content that bridges that gap, and basically to have people come on board with zero knowledge, and then for them to have these sort of breadcrumbs that will lead them down a sort of rabbit hole towards having a bit of confidence, and then hopefully leading to the point where they become brand loyalists, or at least adopting the brand or willing to participate, so that they can start getting involved. Because at this point, I think there's just so much abrasion towards, trying to get involved, because there's so many different ways that, things can go awry. So we're really trying to establish that credibility and have a way where, with very little barriers to entry, they can start becoming onboarded with crypto and start earning crypto. And then as a result of them learning, they're actually finding out more ways to become, involved in the market, or involved in Algorand.
Yeah, because I've noticed in my small, sample size, that people that are pretty new to Algorand, they are pretty new to crypto. They are very receptive to a few things, like, Sylvia Macaulay and MIT, and, his long story, carbon negative. And, they understand the idea of a CBDC, and they, it's like it feels like a very safe entry into the space. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's this piece of it where you're educating the end consumer. But it sounds like there's another piece. And if I sounds sort of like almost like a Yelp. I don't know if that's a fair comparison, but each, there's 700, projects that are being built, and each one of those could have a page, and hopefully does, so that we can kind of crowdsource some information, or maybe that project will contribute information. Did I say that clearly? Am I correct? Or?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So essentially, Algopulse will effectively be sort of two entities that are intertwined. So essentially the news component, the news website where all of the information is housed, as well as essentially the marketing agency that we are building here within the team. And we're going through a rapid sort of expansion of our skill sets, essentially bringing on board project managers, editors of the publication, copywriters, journalists, illustrators, animators, and are bridging out to a sort of worldwide network of creatives that will hopefully start to become this initial proponent of the ambassador community, the contributor community at least. But what we realize is that the Algopulse team will have its limitations in terms of the amount of projects that we can directly be involved in, just by simply the workload that we can handle. So we're working quite closely with a lot of the projects within the Meld Ventures ecosystem, within the borderless capital ecosystem as well too. A lot of projects that they're involved with, but we didn't want that to then be a limitation in terms of having the community, or rather having these other projects having the platform to be able to sort of promote themselves. So that's why we've come up with this ambassador community structure, where essentially any project can basically, it's not like Facebook where you can create a page and then say whatever it is that that comes to mind, because effectively we want to try and mitigate the ability to have nefarious content or scams, or the way for the community to sort of be led astray. So really we want it to be almost like Google Business, where you get to claim a page. The governance ambassadors will have to then authenticate that yes, you are the owner or a co-founder or the CMO directly involved with the project. And then, the next step generally happens is a lot of the projects are phenomenal, innovative people working in the development space and really proficient with technology. But it seems like marketing is almost this other skill set that, is a bit foreign. So that's where we wanted to create kind of like a marketplace where the barriers for entry in terms of helping them promote their projects were lessened. So they can focus on building their technology and really, focusing on what it is that they're good at. And then as they sort of go about claiming a project on Algopulse, there's this ambassador community to help facilitate the work that they need. So it'll be in turns basically providing a strategy to saying, hey, here are the things that are relevant to the industry and what you should look at developing, whether that's a series of articles or explanation videos, whether that's, assisting with skinning the platforms, developing creative, or, whatever it is. So at least then they don't have to have that sort of additional thing that they need to worry about in terms of how do I go about pulling together these resources that I don't necessarily have direct relationships with. There's this community that are already experts in Algorand. that are getting paid in Pulse tokens that we are helping to train and bring up to speed, and really sort of looking after them and nurturing them sort of in that development, so that any project, and hopefully all projects, can have the opportunity to become a part of Algopulse in a really substantiated way.
Excellent. Is the information agnostic, or is there any kind of a rating or opinion, or there's Google reviews? Will there be the equivalent of that?
Yeah, and I think there's, this is another great way of how our advisor network, Chris, Valhalla Capital as well, to have really provided a lot of insight into, getting this, the opinions from a number of the different stakeholders to see basically what it is that they would like to see. So we're not just servicing the community, but we're servicing the Algorand ecosystem as a whole. So what we're trying to do is, through staking and participating in the governance protocol, and in addition to the things that will be a part of the governance protocol is maybe what investment decisions the investment ambassadors are proposing, and essentially that will needing a majority vote, as well as what features and functions do you see on the website, as well as the ability on an everyday basis through polls and interactive ways on the website for people to be able to contribute to content coming up and help drive the direction of that content. But what we want is to have like a multi-step verification system with each project. And again, it hasn't been built out in its entirety, but essentially what we want to do is have this ability, it's sort of like Twitter where you get the blue tick, but a multi-step process of that where, our projects are quite early, we've at least confirmed that they are part of the project, and so that they can start having a presence. That might be the first stage, the first stage of their verification. But then as they go through auditing and launching and have been around for quite a while, there's big sort of investment in terms of qualitative investment involved. There will be this way for essentially visually the community that might not know, might not have read all of the information around what makes that project legitimate. There's a visual way that they can be assured that that project is either trustworthy or on its way towards, that sort of established position in the market.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you start off and you've claimed your page, but next time you go visit after you've been around for a little while, your name's in bold, or it's got a rating next to it, or some kind of a verification.
Yeah,
all right,
exactly.
That's easy for us to go to and reference. Daisy, if you do's got a good question there. You want to read that one off, Coop?
Are we talking about ambassadors?
Yeah.
Yeah. Would the Algopulse ambassadors replace the need for a project to have ambassadors themselves, sort of like ambassadors as a service?
Look, there's really no right answer in terms of, as well too, Algopulse can help facilitate a CMO role for a lot of projects as well too that we're working directly with, if that's not necessarily someone that they have the ability to afford internally. So it's that our service can be flexible, and I think that ultimately the Algopulse community and our Telegram and our various sort of channels will act as this sort of centralized resource where the community can talk about a number of different projects, and at that point be connected to a number of different ambassadors, whether they're Algopulse ambassadors or various others, and be able to sort of make contact with them to be able to help in other areas as well too. And we think that ultimately this sort of ambassador community that we're looking to build, community building is going to be a large service that is a part of that. So there will be the opportunity to make those connections so that ambassadors can be, and whether that's more than moderation ambassadors who are essentially the project leads, there will certainly be the opportunity to provide the connection of those people with those projects.
Excellent. There's another question here, but I might know the answer here, but let's pose it here. So will Algopulse be the first DAO on Algorand, and how long will it take to become a DAO from where you are now?
Look, I'm not too sure if we'll be the first DAO. Certainly by the time we launch sort of in March next year, there are a number of organizations sort of going about utilizing a DAO-based structure. But I do think that we will potentially be the first sort of news DAO with this amount of sort of robust functionality, in addition to the sort of learn to earn feature, and really sort of trying to centralize is a naughty word in this industry. Sorry, like contain all of this information into one sort of source that people can sort of point to and go back to. But so the DAO as well too, obviously it's a very new concept. And that's why we have brought DAO specialists on board to help really figure out how we go about sort of unfolding this functionality, because naturally it's going to be something that at least initially we still need to be custodians of this framework to make sure that there's going to be a robust framework, so that the ambassador community have clear objectives and identities. They know what scope of work is. They know what the strategies are. There's that sort of system. So at least initially, we will basically be nurturing this community or these products or these various features to the point where they become self-sustaining. So based on our estimates and our modeling that we've done, this whole system becomes self-sustaining within 5 years. And realistically, I think at that point, that's when the community becomes largely in control of it. That's where we sort of essentially will largely hand over not the keys, but slowly this will happen over a period where more and more responsibility will be handed over to the community. But naturally, there needs to be a framework that gets developed, and that's why we're working with a lot of prominent community members currently to figure out basically what that is. We don't want to put in all this hard work and getting this sort of system up and running and then risking it fall over because we won't consider it and thinking about how the different ways that this could probably be taken advantage of.
It sounds like it seems like such a simple thing to say, but when you start really diving into it, there's so much more, and you got to make sure that you don't mess it up, right?
Yeah. And we've just almost finished the sort of final touches on our light paper, and that's something that we will be releasing to the community as well too. And we do go into really sort of detailed information about all of these different points. If this is sort of a lot of this has potentially gone over the head, or maybe you haven't had sort of time to grasp some of the concepts, or haven't had enough time to go into enough detail, we've been pretty considerate in really building out this light paper, and hopefully we can have that sort of into the community over the next week.
Some people need to see it and read it and even print it up. So I'm sure there's a bunch of the folks in the community that would appreciate that. So this whole thing went from, hey, let's make a documentary, to this whole Algopulse endeavor, which is pretty robust, right? Walk us through the time frame. Like, at what point did you have this conversation? Did you have this random catch up with Cotton, right? Because you knew each other, and then you from there to here, what kind of time frame are we looking at?
Yeah, and to be clear, we're still looking to produce the documentary, but it might sort of take a bit of a backseat, sort of maybe the year after. But essentially, this project's come pretty hard and fast. Those initial conversations with Michael were probably about 9-10 months ago, and it was really just our business prior to this was, as I mentioned, in the digital marketing and sort of content creation space, and we've always kept our business very liquid in terms of making sure that we hadn't, pegged ourselves into a corner in terms of having high overheads. Basically, knowing that our skill set was always going to be utilized in a way, and we were just waiting on sort of the opportunity. And when this came up and we really started to investigate, as I said before this, we knew nothing about cryptocurrency, we knew nothing about blockchain. So this was a really steep learning curve that we needed to go through. And I guess what happened is, as we got deeper and deeper into the narrative of Algorand and what was happening, we became more and more confident that there was a phenomenal opportunity here, not just to do what we were doing, but in terms of what the applications were of Algorand across the globe. So this was basically had entered us into this voracious information gathering cycle, which then followed into deck building and brand building, and then discussing with investors to see if this was an idea that they were going to be interested in. And basically the feedback that we were getting was overwhelmingly positive. A lot of the people, or rather the firms and the entities that have invested in Algopulse are also heavily invested in a number of different of the ASAs. So they saw this as an integral piece that was missing. So, the most phenomenal technologies in the world can get produced, and obviously terrible technologies can go to the moon through good marketing. You look at what Elon does with Dogecoin. Yeah. So what happens then in terms of these phenomenal technologies is they're going to do some groundbreaking things in terms of finding out ways to get them into at least the minds or the eyeballs of the wider community. So they saw it as a really good opportunity, or rather a missing piece. And then essentially from that point was really determining how we can go about making this sustainable, how we can go about engaging the community in a really robust way, how we can make sure that there's enough functionality that keeps people coming back and keeps people engaged. And it's basically since that point really honing in on the functionality, as well as continuing to establish the relationship with the projects that we're working on. And a lot of the projects that Michael had mentioned, Prismatic, Sovereignty, XPact, we've actually been working with them very early stages to do their branding, to do their assets, and helping to sort of build on their community as well too. So that's been overwhelmingly positive in terms of the amount of collaboration that we've already been invested in at this stage.
Excellent. We got another question here. Will Pulse be the only token used on the platform?
So Pulse will be the only token that users will be able to earn rewards with. There, through the Algopulse pool, there will be an index fund of various ASAs that we're getting through marketing activity. But naturally, there was some considerations there, both in terms of functionality, making sure that people were opted in. For the Pulse token, we didn't want there to get into this situation all of a sudden where there was hundreds of different tokens and people weren't opted into some and they were sitting there. We didn't know what to do with them. So from a just keeping things quite clean point of view, it made sense to keep it to the Pulse token. But then as well too is that it meant there was more incentive for people to become invested in the news source. Then as we're sort of essentially providing that payment structure for the ambassador community, as well as engaging in yield farming activities and buying back Pulse tokens, we have the ability to drive some real value to that Pulse token, which means that obviously as hopefully Algopulse grows, both in terms of its news presence, its team, the amount of sort of content that we're getting to, it will then mean that we have a greater ability to employ more people or pay more people in our tokens to become and contribute to the platform. So it was really an essential component to making this thing sort of self-sustaining.
So sorry if you've already talked about this, but so how far off are we from a Pulse token?
So around March next year is when we're hoping to have that in, at least in some way, in function with the community on the website. There will, potentially be a Pulse token prior to that to fulfill, testing and functionality and sort of other needs our investors. But whether or not users will be able to, effectively do anything with the Pulse token, that's still to be determined. But essentially then as well too, users will be able to stake the Pulse token on the website to participate in governance, as well as help to endorse articles to provide credibility to various writers or various projects, or whatever it is in terms of the content that we're writing. And naturally through this through this platform, we're going to be producing a ton of really high level content, such as the work that our other co-founder Caleb has done in terms of creating the Algopulse world. And that's where we're really trying to develop a lot of high level creative, which will then be minted into NFTs. And then essentially it will form a reward structure for the people who have staked on the Algopulse website to participate in governance and help drive the news. Will then have the ability to be rewarded in some of these NFTs as they're sort of staked, and there's waiting for staking for longer. A lot more functionality as well too.
Right.
Okay. Do you anticipate that people will reference, projects will reference their pages there? Will say, hey, I'm Algopulse certified relatively early on to attract new investors or new partners or something like that? Do you think it will be used that way by projects?
Look, I don't think we have an ego in terms of how we want to be perceived. We just want to try and build it as a robust platform as possible and letting the community really provide credence to that. What we're excited in as well too is working with Anthill and Chris McCluskey to have Algopulse potentially be the new source for these token launches as well too, and basically having it as this qualitative resources that people can come back to. So I think if we provide a lot of user-friendly and responsive functionality, the more the community will use it. So I realistically think its potential will be directly correlated to the amount of effort we're putting in, and we don't sleep. So hopefully that sort of leads to some good products.
Okay, good. How many ambassadors do you have now, and how many projects have you been in contact with? I think you've probably done some of that groundwork now, right?
Yeah, so we've probably got, say, between 15 different projects that we're actively producing work for. as well as, you know, double if not triple that we've been involved with in terms of having discussions, telling them what we're doing, and just letting them know that this sort of platform's coming down as another resource that people can, you know, at least earmark and become involved with. Obviously, we want to, you know, bridge that knowledge gap between what's happening behind the scenes and what the community is privy to. So we want to be that sort of bridge between those conversations. So we are also, you know, working, as I said, working with the foundation as well too, to provide ways that we can help with marketing assistance and helping to disseminate a lot of news and information from them as well too.
Mm-hmm. That kind of ties into what Daisy put down there. So how important is project cross-pollination to building a healthy ecosystem? If you're making connections on the marketing side and all of these projects are kind of, you know, centralized in your hub, do you foresee yourself being, you know, kind of a matchmaker of sorts?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is, you know, one of the services that we do currently provide for nascent type projects who are really early in the development. We will help connect them with investors, connect them with other, you know, project advisors if it's various bits of functionality they need assistance with, as well as then, you know, connecting them with other resources, potentially sort of future staff hires if that's something that is, you know, that we have sort of at least an asset base to sort of work from. But we do work on providing a lot of those early stage connections. So really what we want to be is this sort of this partnership with the projects that we're working on. Now, you know, with that said, we can be flexible in terms of, you know, there's a lot of established projects that will want to use Algopulse to, you know, talk about various sort of updates, features, or things that they have going on. And that's, you know, there is the ability to facilitate activity. But I guess where, you know, and again, based on sort of where Algorand is, a lot of projects still being in development, a lot of projects, you know, the amount of attention now that the various activities have been getting, and Algorand, as it increases its, you know, its sort of portfolio and increases its attention, there will be more and more projects looking to come to market and looking to build on Algorand. So essentially what we're, I guess, provide the most power for the punch, I guess, is essentially working very early stages with projects to help sort of get them off the ground, put them in touch with a lot of people that can help, you know, give them some of that knowledge prior to developing the technology. You know, an example being, we were talking with a project who was, you know, avid that they were going to be having to develop a governance protocol. And it was just a matter of saying, hey, well, there's actually these guys that are, you know, currently in the development of it. We think you should talk to them. You might be able to save some resources and focus on another one of the other features that you're working on. So as our network grows and the more sort of people that we're being connected with in the industry, our ability to actually, you know, help people save time or connect them to the right people to, you know, make those, make it a lot less friction in terms of getting to market and then having them focus on the technologies.
I think that's getting to market and focusing on the technology really frees up most of the people, right? They don't want to have to worry about these other items here that are just sort of a necessary evil, I think. And you know,
thanks for calling marketing evil.
Right? I mean, from their perspective, right? You're doing them a favor.
Yeah.
They have to do this thing. They know they need people to like pay attention to them, but they don't know how. They don't know, you know, they don't have your skill set. And so
yeah, absolutely. And like we're working with Hippo Labs to develop the smart contracts, that's not our skill set. So you work with the experts in the field. And really, that's what we're, you know, trying to help with is like, hey, if you do need help in this area, there is this resource and entirely devoted to Algorand, you know, that you can sort of, you know, we're meeting with people constantly. So we exist.
Yeah.
So we've been asking, you know, most people what they see as the triggers for mass adoption of Algorand. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and look, I guess one of the sort of main criticisms that Algorand, you know, Foundation gets is in relation to marketing. But in reality, you know, sure, there is some more work needed on the grassroots level, and that's certainly what we're here to help facilitate, at least in some fashion. But in terms of going after this institutional level investment, you know, going after, you know, it now being the sort of blockchain that El Salvador is looking to, you know, base a lot of their government functions on, as well as the Marshall Islands becoming a sovereign currency. That sort of, that can't be replicated by anyone else. That can't be replicated by another blockchain. No one can do that activity outside of them. And that realistically is going to be the use case for other CBDCs or other, you know, high level financial institutions, whether that's retirement funds, investment funds, hedge funds, whatever it is, as they look to inevitably convert over to blockchain. Because I really believe it's either going to be they're going to figure out a way to do it, or they're going to be too rigid to the point where they can't, and their services are going to continue to sort of fall away. Because naturally, there's much less barriers to entry, there's much less friction in this industry. So I really think that, and obviously the regulation will help to make sure that that's legitimized. But I think that once it gets to that point, the work that the foundation has been doing on attracting that institutional level investment is just going to have this exponential growth. So we can keep doing what we're doing in supporting the projects and supporting the ecosystem and supporting the community. And as those things naturally progress to a point where they start becoming, established and start having the liquidity and start having the market and the DeFi ecosystem grows, as well as the amount of applications that we're talking to, which are outside of DeFi, but similar to Opulus, for instance, like really doing some huge good in the world in terms of trying to break down these archaic structures, these centralized sort of sources of power. And we're talking with a number of projects that are doing that in different industries. So the ability for Algorand to help sort of facilitate those newsworthy stories, with a lot of traditional institutions, and as they start to adopt a lot more of that institutional investment, that just means that the number of transactions goes through the roof. Once there is a precedent for that activity happening, then it's just going to continue to snowball and snowball and snowball. So I think that the criticism is that it hasn't propagated immediate reward, but it will quite quickly over the next couple of years become evident that that was a really powerful strategy. And that's something that, in reality is what made us convert our whole business over to Algorand now, because we believe that what they're doing is the right thing.
I think it seems like Algorand in general is the under promise and over deliver style, right? Yeah. So they're very quiet about what they're doing, and they're playing the sort of the long game, and then all of a sudden they burst onto the scene. We just need folks like Algopulse to make sure that everybody's there on the scene.
Certainly,
right.
We'll do our best.
I think that's a fair assessment there. All right, I think that is our take us home question right there. So that is that's a good way to sign off on AlgoFest 2021. I think with thinking about mass adoption, and in the grand scheme, I mean, if it only takes a couple of years, then I think we're doing all right. So I'm excited about this project. I'm a member of the Telegram. I keep following you guys, and there's a whole bunch of information. There's a whole bunch of things, just some great projects coming down the line. We've had a great time here today. Dimitri, you've been gracious with your time, and I'm looking forward to kind of watching how everything unfolds from here on out. And for everybody out there in AlgoFest land, thanks for watching. It's been a great 12, 13 hours, huh?
Yeah, it's been a long. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, guys. Well, Crypto Nerd out. I say let's have a good evening or good afternoon, Dimitri, and we'll see everybody on the replay, huh?
Yeah, you guys. If you watched all day, if you've watched my channel, the few of you that do, you've definitely done your homework. So, yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks again, Dimitri. We'll talk to you soon. I'm going to follow you.
Okay. See you guys. Bye.